Friday morning, the Public Safety Committee. It is 8:45, and I am not joined by my colleagues Jan Perry, Paul Krikorian, or Dennis Zine. So we're going to go through the agenda here, call items, try to clear the room. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 9, 11, and 12 on consent. Anybody is here on those items? Let me see if I have any. Oh, I have a public speaker card on none of those items. So if you're here on those items, you are free to take the rest of the day off.
Councilman John White, that was 1, 2, 3. Was 2 included in that list?
Yes, sir. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 9, 11, and 12.
And just for the record, item 3 has a CA report that came in after the release of the agenda. Did you wish to approve that report as part of your action?
Report and approve.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, why don't we go ahead? We've got speaker cards on 4 and 5, so why don't we just jump to 4 and 5 and take the speaker cards on those two first, if we could.
Item 4, a motion of LeBlanc Englander instructing the fire department to report relative to the status of implementing the new deployment plan. Item 5, budget motion instructing the fire department to report on a quarterly basis relative to the status of redeployment and any potential changes that may be necessary, including an updated analysis of response times and call histories under the new deployment plan, and to consult with the union leadership for making final changes to the deployment plan.
Okay, and with the first speaker card is Dr. Williams. And you've got a speaker card on 4 and 5. I'm taking both of those items together. Do you wish to just combine the cards?
Okay. Dr. Tom Williams, LA 32 Neighborhood Council, frequent attendee at the Board of Fire Commissioners, where oral reports are provided on the subject: deployment, redeployment, modified deployment, all sorts of deployments. But a single consistent document is required, and it should be a document. So when you say to report, please require a written report 3 days in advance so the public can make meaningful comments on such an issue. We have a lot of issues. We have 2 fire stations within our area. The description of the deployment plan also is an issue as to what equipment is ready to go but no staff. What equipment is not ready to go with or without staff. How is this going to be changed? And it is being changed on an occasional basis. We don't know when, because the computer says different things for different times. So, they have a base, and there will be changes from that base. One of the consistent changes is each year there's supposed to be a redeployment of resources and staff from areas of structures to areas of brush. This is the brush fire season. They had brush fires in the East San Fernando Valley. Took 75 people. That took a lot of people from a lot of other places, which then were at risk. Mandeville Canyon supposedly had 75 engines. How many people? That's a lot of money and a lot of expense, and we need to have it in writing in a timely fashion so that it can be reported. By the way, for consulting, we'd also like to have the neighborhood councils consulted when there are changes within their areas.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, if we can have the brass step on up and give us the report.
You did.
I understand that it is an oral report right now. We're waiting for a written report. It's being done, but if you want to give us where we're at with that overall, that would be great.
Thank you, sir.
Morning, Chiefs.
Morning. How are you?
Good.
We are here to provide an oral report today. The written report is being created as we speak and will be submitted to the Board of Fire Commissioners. That's our intent, and our goal in developing that written report will B, to understand if this redeployment plan is working the way we anticipated. Where is it working? Where is it not working? Try to determine why, and what are the operational and other impacts, and ultimately, what are the necessary modifications that go with our plan. And we are aware of impacts already, trying to quantify those with data and really determine the whys. You want to talk about response times, Chief?
Sure. Don Frazier, Chief Deputy, Emergency Operations. Thus far, the deployment plan has been in effect for 116 days. As we analyze our deployment, we're actually looking at this point, close to 995,000 data points, responses over a 3-year period as we can compare and contrast. And what I'd like to talk about first is what we're actually measuring. So the first item that we measure is call processing time. This is the time from when the fire department first receives the call from the PSAP, from the police department, to the time that we actually make a dispatch. So that's the first measurement that we have. The second is the time from when the resource is dispatched to the time that they actually start moving towards the incident. We call that dispatch to en route of the first unit. The next measurement is from that time of dispatch to when the first unit arrives on scene. And then we further segregate down from on that measurement for ALS, for BLS, for the first transport, the first engine, first truck, first light force, and then the first battalion chief. These are going to be our key measures to determine if the deployment plan is delivering resources in a timely fashion as compared to the modified coverage plan, as compared to before we reduced resources at all. And that will be part of our written report.
In the written report that you expect to come to the Fire Commission first, what's your ETA on that?
We think we'll have that for December of this year.
Okay, December.
We've recently been able to improve our analysis process, where we actually separate out non-emergency calls that would skew our data. And so by the time we get to December, we'll have enough time to actually make that thorough analysis and put it into a written report.
And are you going to have that geographically or by division, or what? Are you going to have cross tabs for the analysis, or is it just going to be city-wide response? What kind of report are we looking at?
We will make more of an in-depth analysis.
And we're going to have year-to-date and then also comparison data perhaps on previous years, as well as since the trigger point of the deployment plan was established?
Yes. As I said, we're looking at pre any reduction, the modified coverage plan, the expanded modified coverage plan, and now the deployment plan. We'll be able to see that.
Okay. Will this information be available eventually, perhaps maybe not on the first report, but at some point in time on the internet as well for folks to look through, and so we're visible, transparent, and addressing a lot of the concerns? I also understand under the new plan, these are growing pains. I remember when CompStat started, and just trying to get our arms around the detail, the level of detail, adding the graphical information systems, and then how to interpret all that data and measure it. So this is going to be certainly a different exercise that we're going to have to go through and adapt it and change with what questions are being asked.
Actually, it's the interpretation that's critical on that, because there are so many things that go into response and the availability of resources. So when we publish, obviously, that would be provided electronically.
Right. Okay, so why don't we go ahead then and hold this in committee? We'll hold it on the desk until December and schedule it immediately. Once you have that material ready, you have it scheduled for commission, and we can get it scheduled for committee and bring it back here as well.
Okay.
Before we close the item out, however, we do have another speaker's card from Ronald Jackson from the fire chief. Yes.
Councilman, we are aware of impacts now. We are trying to quantify those, but we already have anecdotal and some data that is showing impacts to us now. Trying to address those when we can, but we are also trying to balance that against looking at sufficient data before we make changes, and then pursuing discussions with labor before we make any changes. But
Would it be fair to ask, just since you mentioned the word impacts, and for the public record, would you consider those significant, life-threatening impacts? Would you consider those internal employment and deployment impacts, financial impacts, all the above? Would you rate them at this point, or I'm not sure if it's even premature?
They're obviously not life and death, or we would do something about them today, but there are serious concerns. Some of the things we are seeing, and those are exact areas we're going to look at.
Okay, but you wouldn't put them in the category yet of, or at all right now, as life and death threatening type situations? They're more internal, financial, and employment, or how would you categorize those?
Maybe I can give you a couple examples. The 7 EMS captains are covering the entire city. We are seeing responses from occasionally the San Fernando Valley to the metro area for a response for the work they do, either quality assurance or following up with patients. Emergency incident technicians. 7 of those were eliminated, and we're using command post companies. We've gone through a department-wide training for all our folks to step in, but that is a dramatic shift in work. And in some instances, those command post companies are coming from long distances to assist the battalion chief. So there are gaps in that accountability. We had 2...
How are we doing on code 3s? From the time we receive the dispatch call to the first BLS or ALS or engine that shows up on the scene, how are response times doing?
One of the areas is those districts that had resources eliminated. There is some data that falls out of our goals, but there may be such a small data set that we'd like to see, more data to really validate that for some of those responses. Others have remained the same. So we have some concerns.
So my overall concern is that somebody who is a drowning victim or a heart attack victim or a traffic collision isn't just more data. That we've been meeting our goals with that on first response, particularly for advanced life support, without jeopardizing public safety, first and foremost. And so if it's more data we need to address that would be my primary concern. Everything else secondary. So I want to make sure that we're not, that part of the system, we're not waiting for more data simply for analysis if we're jeopardizing any public safety. You made a comment, it's not a concern right now in terms of life-threatening. There's a lot of other issues certainly that go into this. It's a lot more complicated in terms of the general public understanding of it. But I want to ensure folks that we're meeting those demands at a minimum first and foremost, and have the fire department's assurance that we're able to do that.
As you mentioned, it is a very complex system, and September 5th, 2 brush fires back to back. About half of our engines are out, for a period of time, and our dispatch and the rest of the department is doing its best to try to shore those up. And that is a day where we couldn't predict, 2 large brush fires. The fire weather didn't put us into a pre-deployment day, so there are circumstances that sometimes find us outside our goals.
Well, we're in fire weather now. Are we in pre-deployment mode?
Not today. Yesterday we were. And it wasn't a threshold day. We did it, due to an abundance of caution because it was close to our deployment threshold.
Are there things that people can do when they know it's a red flag day? Are we getting the information out there to the general public to let them know? Are we doing press advisories? I know I haven't received anything in my office on red flag days to put anything in our newsletters or emails or alerts, letting folks know. I know there was an aggressive move that started a couple years ago in doing so. Are we continuing those?
We haven't had one this year, but we do have a very...
It's a good reason for not getting the notification if we haven't had one.
This year, so I knock on wood.
Okay.
But we do have a very aggressive campaign. We post it. Every fire station raises a red flag, and we put up press advisories. That is very well advertised, and but knock on wood, we haven't had one yet. We did get close to our threshold yesterday, and the chief, in an abundance of caution, Chief Cummings, ordered a pre-deployment. So, and it worked out. We did have a fire in the Palisades where one of those engines happened to be first on scene. So, but very dynamic system. It is complex, as Chief Frazier indicated, and we'll try to capture all those nuances in that report.
Is there, with the report, is there any opportunity to get a preview of the preliminary report prior, at least as the Chair of Public Safety, even on so I have an understanding in advance?
Be happy to share our methodology with you.
Be great. Okay. Thank you. We look forward to it, and we'll hold this item on the desk then until, as soon as we get the schedule from the police or for the fire commission that it's being agendized, we'll go ahead and agendize it here as well.
Very good.
And then we have another speaker's card from Ronald Jackson. Come on up.
Commissioner Englander, I'm Ronald Jackson. I represent the Chief Officers Association. In regard to number 5, the last part of this instruction asked for the department to consult with the union leadership before making any final changes to the department redeployment plan. I would also like to include the Chief Officers Association as part of that council before any changes are made. The chief officers have a unique perspective, a managerial perspective of the overall operations, especially the field operations, and to not include them, you would actually lose a good deal of insight as far as what's really happening in the field and how the redeployment plan is affecting the overall operations. Okay, so my request is that you add this specifically, the chief officers, to this sentence that asks for union leadership be consulted.
Great. Okay. Okay. Thank you. That concludes item 4 and 5. So the next item.
Next item is number 8.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Communication from the mayor relative to extending the program term of the 2008 Urban Area Security Initiative Grant Award, contracts with partner jurisdictions, and modifying project budgets. On this item, you also have a CO report that was released after the publication of the agenda.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing? Walk us through, if you will, the new projects and where we're at with this.
Ed Rose with the CIO's office. Report you have before you concerns the fiscal year 08 UASI budget modifications, and basically an overview. It extends the grant performance period for various projects, in addition to reconfiguring some existing projects that could not be completed within the grant performance period, and reallocated funds to fund various projects within the fire department and other agencies within the city, mostly consisting of USAR training, equipment purchases, and other various aspects of the USAR grant. We have representatives here from the departments and the mayor's office. We're available for any kind of questions you may have.
Well, what are the new projects associated with the grant here now? What are the other couple questions on the UASI grants? Do we front the money on these grants and then get reimbursed? And if so, how often are they audited? And do we ever fail to meet the requirements of the audit and therefore not seek the reimbursement?
My name is Spur. I'm the interim grants director for the mayor's office. We have the ability to request advance funding from the grantor. So we have that. We also have our partner jurisdictions who front fund the cost and seek reimbursement.
We have the ability to
Right.
seek the advance funding. Do we seek the advance funding? We have
We
the,
do.
okay, and
We have-
do we obtain it every time?
Yes, we do, and we have 120 days to expend those advance funds per grant guidelines.
Okay. And how are we doing on audits of the grants as well? Are we meeting all the expectations and requirements?
We are meeting the grant requirements.
And
We do get audited by the grantors every 2 years.
Have we failed to meet any and pass any of the audits where we've had to either reimburse
No, we have not.
any of these funds at all?
I'm sorry?
Any of the funds at all from UASC?
No.
None. No. It's a good track record. Should give you some more grant opportunities. And can you walk us through some of the training and equipment, specifically where this is tied to for LA Fire and LAPD?
So for the...
Or it's all LAPD, I would take it.
It's actually called, it's fire department.
There's some fire, okay.
They have urban search and rescue, hazmat, and tactical emergency medical services training courses. And then in addition, they have various equipment purchases that they will be making: geographic information system software, tactical emergency medical services equipment, rebreathers, urban search and rescue equipment for their USAR teams, and joint hazard assessment team radios for their vehicles, and regional standard certified breathing apparatus cylinders. In addition, dive team equipment. That's the fire department's projects.
I see here there's $100,000 for emergency readiness materials printed through General Services Department. What are they spending $100,000 on printing?
So the emergency management department is one of their projects is a community emergency preparedness outreach campaign, and I believe we have a representative who can speak on that particular project.
Good morning, Anna Burton with the Emergency Management Department. We've been working closely with a number of departments to get readiness and informational material that we'll distribute to the public. It is primarily on how to be prepared, a variety of different checklists. They are in English and Spanish. We're also providing them in large print and Braille. And these will be distributed as soon as General Services delivers them. We will be able to distribute them to all public counters within the city for the general public.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Well, we have a large contingency of constituents of Braille readers in CD12. In fact, the highest in the city. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yes, we are aware
Make
of
sure
it.
we can get some of those to our district as well. Thank you. The automated license plate recognitions equipment, is this for patrol vehicles, or are these, what specifically, which black and whites would these be equipped for?
Let me, we have a representative from the LAPD department who can answer that question.
Good morning, John Conley, LAPD. LPR, what they will purchase is about 40 systems, and what those systems consist of is a camera as well as all the necessary computer equipment to transmit that data that's captured on by the cameras in the black and white vehicles that do go in patrol. And they are collected at the Information Technology Bureau at LAPD's downtown facility at PAB.
And what kind of hits are they looking at? Is it strictly
it
for?
It could be intended to provide critical infrastructure protection. It can be installed. It could also be for stolen vehicles and their license plates.
Are we looking?
That was the primary intention of it.
Okay.
It's expanded to also cover if an outside agency or within our own department, if we are conducting an investigation where we're looking for a suspect vehicle and it has a partial plate or a full plate, you enter that data into the system, and if any vehicle, black and white, that carries ALPR on that vehicle happens to run across it, then it'll capture that hit and it'll alert the folks downtown, and the officers that are operating that vehicle can make a stop.
Does it scan as well for other either infractions or anything else in terms of out of expired registrations or a suspended license, or can it be programmed?
Not that necessarily, but it can be programmed to look for those. What the department aims to achieve is to catch the major crimes, such as rape, murder, any type of organized crime activity, with the primary mission being counterterrorism.
And do we download Amber Alert data into the system as they come as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it could be used to reprogram if so the policy ever reflected that we were looking for other additional lower level type crimes or hits on vehicles besides felony, that would be expired plates or expired license, suspended license.
That I'm not sure about.
I know there's other municipalities that are actually doing that now, but if you can look into that and let us know what options might be available for some of those other types of incidents with the
Absolutely,
system,
sir.
that'd be great. Okay, we'll go ahead and move this item as well, and I don't think there's any public comment on this, and there's not, so great, thank you.
We do have a technical correction that was, we became aware of subsequent to the release of the report, a copy of which has been forwarded to the clerk's office. Just a technical correction for an account change in recommendation number 2D.
Okay, I don't know that I received the technical correction. Make sure that you have it? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. All right, next item, please.
Next item is item 10, Personnel Department report relative to activities undertaken regarding the recruitment and selection of the qualified police officer candidates for the period July through December 2010.
Morning.
Morning. Gloria Sosa, Personnel Department.
I'm Captain Rigo Romero, the Commanding Officer of Recruitment and Employment Division.
Before you is a report listing all the activities with regards to police hiring and recruitment during the period of July through December 2010, and we're available to answer any questions you may have.
Great. If you could just walk us through the report and let us know what's going on with, for those who are listening in as well, how we're doing on recruitment, where we're at in terms of class size, all of those efforts.
Currently, for this fiscal year, since July, we've hired 140 new recruits. Our class size is approximately 45 to 50 per class. We have another class starting.
Is that graduating or starting?
Starting. And we have another class starting November 7th, and we have 50 starting on November 7th. So we should be up to about 190. As far as where LAPD is at the pay period ending October 8th, there was 9,923 officers on the work in LAPD's foreign workforce deployment. So again, the maximum is 9,963, so there is a slight deficit at this time. Hence, that's why we're hiring the additional 50. During last fiscal year, which is reflected in this report, we hired 215 for the entire fiscal year. We expect to hire more again due to attrition this fiscal year. The report lists a number of activities that personnel and LAPD have done over during this period of, again, July 2010 to December 2010. We list all the activities, which includes recruitment seminars sponsored specifically by LAPD and Personnel Department, military events, different events at colleges as well.
Would you suggest that since we're only hiring really essentially to attrition at this point, and we also have a lot of the vets coming back home, which is, I think, a great thing.
Right.
But a lot of them are going to be seeking employment. Those who wish to be police officers, that it's necessary to spend as much time right now doing recruitment in the field at job fairs, and is that as critical? We're still getting, it seems to me, a pretty high number of applicants, and there's a bigger pool out there with unemployment being what it is, but particularly with the vets coming back, because these are sworn officers that are actually going out to these recruitment efforts and assigned to recruitment, particularly when we've just reassigned 150 because of the realignment. It would seem to me more boots on the ground right now would be critical. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the fact is that we have reduced our efforts as far, given the different factors that you've just cited. Previously, in the previous fiscal years 08, 09, 10, we had a much larger, first of all, advertising budget. We had a full $1 million specifically dedicated to media buys. We no longer have that. We actually are operating off of a advertising budget of $185,000, which is for all of our general recruitment, police advertising. And as far as staffing, that has also been reduced. The recruiters, the LAPD recruiters, are even more essential given that we don't have the advertising dollars. They are the ones that are doing the canvassing, the boots on the ground, so to speak, in relation to the recruitment seminars that we sponsor every quarter. We have one for each different targeted group. We have meet and greets.
How many people right now do we have in recruitment? How many officers?
Well, right now in recruitment, we have 1 lieutenant, 2 sergeants, and 15 police officers.
How many?
15 police officers, P3s, and actually 1 P3 plus 1. And
these are all full-time?
They're full-time employees, that is correct. And I do have a dedicated team that does military recruitment as well, which is something that's very important. It goes right to the point that you made, Mr. Councilman. And they're at the different military sites every day.
Can you report back just a breakdown of the personnel you have doing recruitment, and have a report back just on what they're doing specifically with those 20 officers, if you will?
Actually, I think it's highlighted in the report, Mr. Councilmember, because what their duties and responsibilities have not changed, even though this is a report from last year at the end. The officers that we have now, for example, the 2 sergeants oversee the activities of the recruiters who are in the field, and the officers who are in the field are recruiting, as Ms. Sosa indicated, at different venues. As an example, just recently my recruiters were over at the Taste of Soul. I'm sorry, the Taste of Soul, where we actually saw there were hundreds of thousands of people there. They've also been very actively involved at the Camp Pendleton, which is a place that we visit very, very regularly, as well as the colleges, as Ms. Sosa indicated, the special events. And so they're very involved in that every single day. We also do pocket testing, which is testing specifically at particular locations to do that testing in the community, along with our personnel division.
And in addition to that, those recruiters that are doing those pocket tests are also responsible for doing any sort of lead recruitment, meeting with different community organizations, again, to get the word out that LAPD is coming to test. And that the 15 also includes the mentors?
Yes, we have 4 mentors included in that group of 15 police officers as well, who do regular mentoring with the candidates who are in the pool to be certified in the hiring process.
Although we are getting a number of candidates as a result of the economic situation, the fact of the matter is that in their commitment to continue in the process, at times waivers, these are not individuals that had necessarily considered or thought about a career with the LAPD until relatively recently. So our mentors play a key role in keeping people motivated and understanding what the position is all about, working with them on their physical fitness, which is a very important issue. Many people, again, our society is not as healthy as we would like. And,
But we try to get them as healthy as we can.
right. But again, and that it takes a considerable amount of motivation, and the mentors address that.
In looking at this, I'm just trying to analyze some of the efforts to see if it truly is feasible to continue on some of these, particularly the out-of-town ones. I'm assuming some of these Palm Springs, maybe out of overnights, if they're multiple-day events.
Well, Palm Springs probably is around the military issue.
That is correct, yes.
Right. We're there at 29 Palms and so forth. As far as...
This was a parade.
This is what?
This, according to the report, the Palm Springs was actually just a parade. But and for example, I'm just highlighting this one. I don't know. I'm assuming it was more than one, probably 2, 3. It doesn't say how many LAPD officers actually attended that. So the report doesn't go into that. It says the total number attended 65. I'm assuming that's how many people signed up for something.
Took the test.
It says, well, number attended, and the number tested were 50. How many of those 50, what did that result in? There's a column missing in terms of passed the test or is continuing in the application process. And then if it looks like we've got 3 people spending 2 or possibly 3 days, that's where the report falls short. At a recruitment effort in Palm Springs, and it might have yielded 10 or 20 people that passed the test who may have yielded 2 or 3 that continue on. We don't see it all the way through, get the whole picture.
Right.
And so are those efforts, really truly worth it? And that's really a fiscal question, not one that trying to delve into, trying to be everywhere. We have to attract,
right.
Social, ethnic backgrounds of diversity to reflect the city, and I appreciate that, and we should do that. I think we have a lot of that, though, here, just in our boundaries locally, that we don't have to spend the same type of effort or the taxpayer dollars in. There's a cost in certainly signing up and participating and having a booth at a fair, sending the folks out there, room and board, time. And so looking at some of those efforts, those are the kinds of questions. I'm not going to hold you to any accountability at this point. I'm still the new chairman of the committee, but those are the kind of things that I'm going to focus on from a fiscal perspective, knowing full well what are we doing then in better preparation, knowing that we've got, again, these the military personnel coming home and redirecting more of the efforts towards, we certainly know that they've had a lot better training and experience, and a lot of those folks, in fact, grow up from the beginning saying they want to get in the military, but ultimately want to be police officers with the Los Angeles Police Department, the finest department in the United States. So that's what I'm going to be looking for in the future on these reports, if you would.
Okay.
Okay? Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Keep up the great work. All right. We've got...
So, Mr. Englander, did you want to note and file the report?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. The only items left are 13 and 14, I believe.
And 12?
And 12.
Did you mean to approve that on consent earlier as a donation?
12 was on consent.
Okay, thank you. That leaves items 13 and 14.
I'm going to hold 13 and 14 on the table until we have a city attorney present. Oh, well, the city attorney for the committee is not. So we'll hold those items until we have a city attorney for the...
It's just from the city attorney's office.
From the city attorney's office, but the city attorney assigned to the committee isn't here. So we'll hold those items on the table for the next meeting, and we'll go ahead and take public comment. Dr. Williams, followed by Noel Weiss, please.
Good morning. Dr. Tom Williams, Northeast LA Coalition, Alliance of Various Neighborhood Councils. One of our issues is brush clearance, and the fire department has a program for brush clearance, but it's a mess. We've had 2 big brush fires, one in Mandeville Canyon, one in the eastern San Fernando Valley, both of which reflect upon the brush clearance. Without adequate brush clearance that is in compliance with the LA Fire Department's own regulations, we'll continue to have to redeploy resources from areas of structures to areas of brush. These are generally from the south area or from Boyle Heights up to Mulholland Drive. If you just go along Mulholland Drive, you can see that the fire department does not equally enforce the requirements for brush clearance, not just for 1 year, but for many years. The East San Fernando Valley fire only a couple weeks ago, it had never been cleared. It was brush. Mandeville Canyon, same problem. Laurel Canyon will have the same problem. Benedict Canyon will have the same problem. Mount Washington, I submitted over 100 different parcels that basically have never been cleared to the requirements of the LA Fire Department or the lot cleaning division of the Public Works. It's a mess. It needs to be changed, and it isn't being changed. So I'd highly recommend that you put forward a motion to really make it a cost-effective, full cost recovery clearing of the brush. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, Mr. Solomon.
Okay. Councilman Englander, good morning.
Morning.
I'm here to basically advocate for the committee's prompt review or waiver of Ms. Perry's motion that was introduced on October 25th, Council File 11-1813. That motion asks for a, if you will, a study of the safety considerations attendant to a tank farm facility in CD15 on Gaffey. It's 25,000 gallons to 25 million gallons to 12.5 million gallon tanks of butane and propane. I don't know if you're familiar with the situation. Okay, bottom line is what I'm giving you today is something that Ms. Perry excluded from her motion, which, by the way, doesn't have a deadline to report back. Two, the Harbor Department really should be included in the motion. Secondly, what I'm giving you now is a revocable permit for the rail spur attached to this facility. That rail spur was issued by the City Attorney's Office to this property owner. Essentially, it's a revocable permit. The permit, frankly, should be revoked until this operator provides adequate insurance to protect the city, to protect those landowners. There's no requirement under this revocable permit in any way, shape, or form for any degree of insurance whatsoever. This council has subpoena power. This committee has subpoena power. Whether the materials to be subpoenaed are proprietary or not is not an issue, because that can always basically be taken care of. But I think in your capacity as chairman of the committee, if these tanks blew for whatever reason, I don't think anybody would want it on their conscience. It's a question of assessing the risk. It's really important that this be done post-haste, and basically all that means is processing it through your committee, putting it before the council, let the council vote. We can have our study in a timely fashion, and hopefully the residents of this community can get the benefit of that input. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take items 13 and 14, since we do have the City Attorney's Office present, and you've been very patient this morning and rushing down here in traffic as well, so thank you for doing that.
No problem. Just so you know where I am and where I come from. My name is Ann Tremblay. I'm an assistant city attorney, and I'm the supervisor of the anti-gang section. So I'm on the criminal side of the office. So certainly, not having Ms. Gonzalez here, I understand your concerns because she is, of course, on the civil side of the office and your counsel. But I think based on what you might be looking for, I can certainly provide the information, and I can always connect with Ms. Gonzalez if there's something more that you need to.
So you're on the good side of the office.
I feel like I am, and I've got my partner, my close partner here.
We like her side.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right, so we'll just go ahead and take both of these together since Mr. Zine is not here. These were his motions, but I am very interested in finding out what we're doing with civil and criminal penalties as they relate to graffiti. We're spending upwards of $7 million a year in graffiti abatement. That doesn't include the $1,000 reward that we give out. That comes from another fund. But how are we doing on these?
Well, criminal prosecution remains the primary mechanism by which we try to recoup the costs that the city incurs with regard to graffiti. So obviously, the process. LAPD, does the investigation, makes the arrest, and brings the cases to us. For us, of course, it's only the adult criminal defendants. The district attorney's office handles the juveniles, which is a substantial number when it comes to graffiti. So as a part of our criminal cases, we always seek restitution. If the city is the direct victim, then the restitution comes back to the city because they're the direct victim because it's city property, in the parks, on a city building, et cetera. In addition, we now have a mechanism. The law's changed over the last couple of years, and we also contemplated it when we revised the graffiti ordinance in 2009 to be sure that the city could also recoup the costs when one of the city graffiti contractors paints out the graffiti on private property. Since that private person did not incur any damage, since the city paid the contractor, we wanted to make sure there was a mechanism for the city to recoup that loss and stand in the shoes of that victim, since it's actually us that paid the money.
We have that in place now?
That is in place now. Both a state law changed, which allowed for that, and we sort of had a working committee on various issues related to graffiti across many departments with the city, and we worked specifically with Office of Community Beautification to change the consent form that they use, that they have private property owners sign, to specifically assign the rights to the city for any restitution that's obtained as the result of a criminal case.
We have a report on what we've actually been able to get back in terms of restitution?
Well, this is sort of the challenge. I know I'd talked to John Deering with the CLA's office, and he was going to try to attain those numbers of what goes into the funds, because in a criminal case, we seek the restitution. If a defendant wants a restitution hearing, we put on that restitution hearing to approve the amount of damages, but then the court takes over in terms of ordering the amount and collecting it, and then it comes through the city clerk's office into one of the funds. So I wasn't able to get those numbers of what like year to date, how much has gone in, so we could do a comparison from the prior years to see where we are at this point and see if our numbers are going up, down, where we are. So I don't have the numbers. I know
Have you put the request in for the numbers?
I talked to John on Wednesday and said, can you check with the clerk's office, because I thought he could probably do that easier and quicker than me with John Deering to get those numbers so that we can see where we're going on the numbers. Because it's certainly, if you look over historically, it's really varied, and unfortunately that's the tough part of it, is we can only get it ordered. We can't force the defendant to pay it on the criminal side. And sometimes their probation will get terminated when they haven't paid the restitution. And frankly, one of the challenges we always face is that now that if the city's going to be the victim, that puts a lot of pressure on the Office of Community Beautification, because if we do a hearing, we need someone from their office to come in. So in terms of resources, it becomes labor intensive for them. So, in these difficult times, there's always challenges, but obviously getting restitution back for both private individuals as well as the city is a priority for us in in our cases. We have seen an increase in graffiti cases over the last couple years, because we've been, since Mr. Tutanich took office, we've been particularly proactive with graffiti cases, not just working with LAPD, but working with the Sheriff's Department, since their Transit Services Bureau covers all the trains, buses, et cetera, which are prime for graffiti.
So when we hire one of these abatement companies to go out immediately within 24 hours and clean up the graffiti, do they take photos and submit those photos into some type of database so we can track?
There is that mechanism going on now. That's something that's new, is the taggers, TAGRS database, and that's up and running, and I know it was in the Valley, and where we were working.
Is that an acronym for something, or we're just referring to taggers?
Yes, it is.
I'm sure it was. That's why I asked.
Yeah,
I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, you are, because like so many acronyms in the city, but
Yeah.
I have it here somewhere, so I could tell you what it is. I'll look it up for you. But that is something that's gone on, and one of the beauties of that system is that was something that the Orange County Sheriff's developed and gave to the city free of charge. But obviously, we got to get the computer systems up and going. They have been doing it in the Valley, and we're looking at funding and server space and everything to expand that. So I think there's actually going to be future reports on that I'm sure you'll be seeing as we move forward on that. One of the beauties of that is the fact that they can accumulate more charges against a defendant by tracking it that way, because it goes in, if the graffiti contractor with the smartphone takes the picture, they get trained, first of all, in what to take pictures of. They don't take pictures of everything. It has to be graffiti that would have investigative value. It goes into the system automatically, and then an officer reviews it, categorizes it. So what they have had some success with, I know initially, was being able to they catch an offender red-handed, and the graffiti is similar to something that's already in the database, and then they're able to aggregate the charges, because frankly, a lot of times one of the beauties of graffiti offenders is that they're often very proud of their work. So once the officers ask them questions, they tend to make admissions that, in fact, they did all this other graffiti. So that's been a great way to be able to, instead of getting one count, getting 10 counts filed against them, that sort of thing, so that we can both aggregate the charges, make sure they know it's serious, and then also collect the restitution.
And how many arrests have actually been made in the last couple of years on
From
graffiti vandals?
taggers, we'd have to get that info from LAPD. I will say, I know the last time I checked, which was a year ago, they'd all been juveniles. None of them had been adult offenders that our office prosecuted.
The report here says it was 613 arrests in the last 3 years.
I think that's graffiti total, not
That's
from
graffiti
taggers.
specific, the misdemeanor charge on that one.
I see.
Our databases don't extract from all the other vandalism charges, which are in the 12 or 1 or 2,000 for this year alone. How many of those are graffiti? We'd have to do basically a hand search through those arrest reports to see if those were arrested specifically for graffiti.
Mhm. Okay. And how is it, do we actually go after the private property owners to collect? I wasn't quite sure. I didn't capture. We have the ability now to do it according to state laws, what you stated.
Well, we wouldn't go after the private property owners. If they're cooperative and allow our graffiti contractors to remove graffiti, then we're doing that in order to abate graffiti, especially for property owners that, in order to remove the blight immediately. That's a mechanism we've set up. But we don't then go after the property owner. The only property owners we would go after would usually be under, like, building and safety if it's chronically, and we've asked them to remove it, or building and safety has issued the order to comply to remove graffiti or whatever else is going on with their property, and they don't, then conceivably we would go after them. In terms of LAP, we don't, on the prosecution end, we tend to deal with LAPD, and we haven't gone after any property owners. One of the things I wanted to mention that's contemplated in this graffiti ordinance that we haven't been able to implement is an administrative citation.
That's what I was going to ask you about as well. And so is that something we'd want to do, is lower the threshold of that citation if it becomes administrative?
I think there's a lot of advantage to it, and you're probably well-versed now in the city attorney's proposal for the ACE program. And certainly ACE contemplated what was already in this revised ordinance in terms of administrative proceedings. There are some differences, but if ACE were implemented, there are parts of the municipal code that would be appropriate for ACE, and I do think, from my perspective, could be an effective use.
What are some examples, so we can get into the details of that?
Sure.
Because
Well,
if under ACE, if it's a matter of citing one of the vandals,
probably not.
Okay, because then
Probably not.
that wouldn't effectuate it, that wouldn't result in an arrest.
Yeah, and we want to take, because we take graffiti seriously, and if they're repeat offenders, then we would want to go through the criminal courts, because we really want to take it seriously.
Good.
But remember, one of the things that's under the LAMC now that frankly isn't being investigated and prosecuted, I don't believe LAPD has done any in recent memory, and certainly none have been submitted to us, are things like, and certainly something I know this is something that's near and dear to Councilmember Zine's heart, is the stores that sell spray paint and felt tip markers and all those things. They have to keep those locked and out of public access.
In fact, we just had a motion on council this week, which asked the city attorney's office to prepare a new ordinance requiring those retail outlets to have signs. And so
you could certainly see, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I could imagine that as a policy matter for the city, that would be an appropriate use of something like ACE rather than going straight for a criminal prosecution, in order to give somebody the opportunity to say, hey, these are small, that is a lower level offense than obviously doing a giant tag that caused $10,000 worth of damage. So I think there are some sections within that being the obvious one. And then frankly, again, this would be a policy decision. Our graffiti ordinance does contemplate the fact that although we don't prosecute juveniles, that we could in fact go after their parents administratively, because the parents are held responsible up to $25,000 of the damage done by their minor child. So again, that would be a policy matter. It's contemplated in the ordinance. We'd have to decide whether that's something that we would want to use our resources on as well, depending on how we want to approach graffiti.
And what kind of hardship that would be on parents.
Exactly. And that's why one of the things we did in this ordinance that would be different from ACE is we did contemplate things like community service or parenting classes.
I think we'd see emancipation go up
Yeah.
significantly if that happened.
Probably, but we did, when the ordinance was crafted, as it went through the process, obviously that was a concern that that may be too draconian, going after parents, especially parents who might be in difficult financial straits, but how could we address the issue but give them another option, such as parenting classes or community service. So the ordinance is flexible in that regard. So I think we have done, as you may be aware, one thing we have done on the civil front, not based on the ordinance, because the ordinance was sort of probably too limited, is we did file the first of its kind suit against a tagging crew. Right. And that we did against the Metro Transit Assassins, as they're known, the MTA, and that litigation is still pending against that tagging crew and 9 of its members. And that we did under a nuisance abatement action as well as an unfair competition sections to see if we could really hit them where it hurt, because this was a large crew, prolific taggers. So that's pending, and we'll see how that goes to see whether, as we move forward, what options we have in civil court as well. And the only other thing I'd say, too, is just as I think, again, since you're familiar with ACE and what that proposal is, there is a different standard of proof from criminal cases to the administrative citation enforcement. It would, in these times of limited resources, give us more options rather than going to criminal court to fight graffiti. So.
Okay. Well, we've spent a lot of time on this morning. I know we've already gone through all the questions and answers on the motions and the status of enforcement, civil fines, penalties, graffiti vandals, what we're doing, the number of arrests, convictions, fines assessed, and what we've collected over the last 3 years, which are reflected in the report as well. So this was extensive, and I appreciate that. I'm now joined by Mr. Zine, who may have some questions as well, although I think we've answered most of them, but he is here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The LAPD versus the LA Sheriff's Department, it seems that their enforcement, at least on the visibility with media, is much more aggressive than LAPD, and the prosecution. Do we ever work with the LA County Sheriff's Department in this endeavor of graffiti and eradication?
Yes, we work very closely with the Sheriff's Department, the Transit Service Bureau, Special Problems Unit that does a lot of those high-profile cases, including search warrants against multiple members of graffiti crews. Although LAPD, as always, is our partner in so much that we do, including the lawsuit against MTA, the primary law enforcement agency on that lawsuit was the Sheriff's Department. The evidence that we used against that crew was primarily drawn from the Sheriff's Department. Our attorney actually was over at that over at their the MTA building that they work out of on a weekly basis, working directly with them. We also now, because of that relationship we established, and I have to give a shout out to Mr. Chutanich for that, because of his county contacts, that really spurred connecting us with them and developing that close relationship, that they bring all of their graffiti cases directly to us in the gang unit rather than taking them out to our branch operations, so that we do the vertical prosecution in gangs. So that's one of the things we've sort of expanded beyond gangs and guns. We're doing as much vertical prosecution of not just gang graffiti, but of graffiti taggers, especially the more prolific ones, so that we can make sure that we do all the follow-through and follow-up to get good sentences and get the restitution. So the sheriff's been a great partner for us. Several of our DCAs have gone out on the search warrants to see what they do, how they do that, so that we can learn more to do better on those cases as prosecutors.
And the issue with the penalties, there was a situation in Hollywood where a mother was actually taking her child and some others to tag along the area of Hollywood. When it comes to the penalties, I understand the consequences, but if a parent is engaged in it, there should be some opportunity for us to go after that parent on a civil matter versus a parent who does not know what the child is doing. I've gone out on some of the probation searches where you'll see the house where the individual resides, the bedroom all tagged up, and you ask the parents, and it's an incorrigible child. I can understand, but when a parent is actually transporting a child to go down and tag and basically taking the child out as an outing, there should be some consequences. Do we ever utilize some of the penalties against the parent on that, who's obviously negligent?
We have not, that I'm aware of, done any sort of civil suit against a parent in that regard. I know there has been some criminal prosecutions of parents on occasion related to that sort of activity, I think primarily contributing to a delinquency of a minor charge, or obviously they could certainly be charged with aiding and abetting or conspiracy charge on the felony level if it ended up being a more serious crime like graffiti that rose to the felony level. But I think, like anything, council member, we'd have to have the resources and, of course, for us as lawyers, the investigation and the evidence to do that. So we'd have to have the Sheriff's Department or LAPD develop that evidence so that we would be able to present it to either a civil or criminal court. So certainly I think I don't disagree with you, and I don't believe Mr. Chutanich would, that's something that we would take very seriously, but we'd have to develop the evidence. We can't do it in a vacuum. So
No, I understand, but at least to have that in the ordinance, to have that opportunity to go on a civil versus just discounting civil altogether, because if they own a home and they don't want to pay a lien on the property, it seems that the liens have become very popular. You don't pay the bill, we're going to lien the property. And
that is contemplated in the ordinance when it was arrived in 2009, that the civil action, including one against the parents, is something that's in the ordinance and viable.
It is there. Okay, so, because when I came in, I thought that we weren't pursuing it, that wasn't part of it.
No, it is in there. Again, I think in terms of I think we were focused on if we just went after a juvenile who committed the crime's parents. I know that previously, and when we were going through the ordinance, there was a lot of concerns that might, as a matter of public policy, it may not be appropriate to go after parents, especially if they're not parents of tremendous amount of means, if their children are doing this, that we'd have to be careful. I know there was a lot of controversy. I think it was out in Pico Rivera or one of those a few years ago about that sort of mechanism of parents, or when the probation department was trying to get the court costs and fees out of the parents. There was some concern. So that was around the same time we were doing the ordinance. Again, that's why we included some other options to allow for some flexibility and to use our, discretion as prosecutors to appropriately pursue the cases.
And if we could ask you to report back to this committee formally with the recommendations that they have made, can we get that done? All of the recommendations?
If you could just help me along there, which recommendations specifically? What do you?
Regarding the graffiti issue, what recommendations? We're working on an ordinance, I assume, or enhancement of an ordinance?
No, this was all about the existing ordinance, just reporting back. So I think Councilmember Englander told me there's a new proposal for an
The
ordinance.
signage, that was heard, that
signage.
was your motion, Councilman. It was heard in council, where that ordinance is actually coming directly back to council, so we can expedite that quickly.
Right, but the status of enforcement, civil fines and penalties against graffiti vandals report with the number of graffiti, maybe that was already done before I got here.
Yeah, that was the report, yeah. We just went through the full report, so we've got that all on the record as well.
So basically, is there anything else you can recommend that we do to counter this continuing saga?
Well, resources. I know you may not want to hear that, but if I had more prosecutors, I could do more cases. But
Do the neighborhood prosecutors ever engage in this activity?
no, Mr. Chutkanich just put it within the gang section, so it's the gang section's attorneys that have been working on it, as well as our branch court operations do graffiti cases on a regular basis. Again, we've tried to focus on the taggers and tagging crew members, as well as the more prolific and high-profile taggers if they come to us on misdemeanors. So we have taken that on in addition to the gang and gun cases we do, even though we're fewer attorneys now. So we're just, we're working as hard as we can and as aggressively as we can on these cases.
Right, we're all overtaxed, there's no question about that, and I don't know what resources are going to be continued. The police department's 150 short of their trained officers, 92 sergeants short lieutenants. I mean, up and down the line. It's like the criminal justice system seems to be having some major issues, including the city attorney's office. And I've met with the city attorney a number of times about the funding, and it seems that his request for funding is oftentimes ignored, not by me, but by other individuals. So and if we don't have the prosecution, we basically go nowhere, because then the laws make no sense without any kind of follow-up enforcement by the prosecutors.
Yep, and that's why we continue working with our partners at LAPD and at the Sheriff's Department, just regardless of the current state of resources, just keep pushing forward, and we'll see what happens with our first-of-its-kind civil suit. That's in litigation. That's been over a year and a half of litigation, and then a tremendous amount of attorney time. But we wanted to do something different and see if we could make an impact in a different way.
Do they have private counsel representing them?
Some of them have private counsel, and then also the ACLU represents a couple of the defendants.
So it'll be a while.
It is. It's been well over a year since we filed it, and that's the challenge of civil litigation. It's definitely labor intensive and cost intensive. So that's where we have to balance of going forward on these cases, and that's why I do think if the council in its wisdom does pass the ACE program, I do think there is a good opportunity for certain types of cases, graffiti related, that may not be even being pursued at this point, to be included in ACE. Not your prosecution of actual graffiti and graffiti tools cases, but other violations of the LAMC, that's an opportunity we would have as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and receive and file both reports on those items, and that should conclude the committee agenda.
That was quick.
We're adjourned.